Hey guys, and welcome to BioWare Follower. As the newly appointed expert of all things Dragon Age here at the channel, I thought I'd do a little thought experiment. Seeing as we're pretty damn sure that the new BioWare IP, codenamed Dylan, will be making its debut at E3, I just wanted to have a stab at what I think the next Dragon Age game should be. You know, just in case they end up teasing it at E3 as well. So here it is, my pitch for DA4. Quick warning before we start. Massive spoiler warning for the entire Dragon Age franchise so far. You have been warned. First off, the setting. This is the easiest to pin down, seeing that BioWare has all but told us already exactly where the next game will be set. Tevinter, homeland of Dorian, Fenris and Krem, bastion of slavery, blood magic and magisters. There's absolutely no shortage of narrative potential with this one, and I can't wait to see it realised in game. If I had one suggestion, I would say don't make it quite as open world as Inquisition was. Go back to the Origins map style, you know, with lots of small but varied maps that we have to travel in between, rather than a handful of vast maps that drag the pacing of the story. This would also free up resources to visit other countries we haven't seen yet, as well as seeing places we haven't seen in ages. I can't tell you how much I would love to visit Denerim or Amaranthine or Kirkwall. Personally, I would set this just after the Exalted Council in the Trespasser DLC, so just to give you an idea for timeline. So let's move on to the story. What makes the most sense is for the game to revolve around a mass slave uprising, and for the player character to be the leader of that uprising. Not only does this fit into some strong foreshadowing in canon, it also doesn't lock the PC out of being a dwarf, an elf or Qunari. And by Qunari, of course, I mean Vashoth, just like in Inquisition. It also leaves the option to delve into some really nail-biting moral dilemmas, and to quote Bruce Bolton of all people,
"The high road's very pretty, but you'll have a hard time marching your army down it."
And if I could have two suggestions for the player character, if we're playing a mage, give us the ability to play a blood mage, and have that mean something in the narrative. Say, for example, your forces get caught in an ambush, and you're offered the chance to turn the tide of the fight by using the blood of some wounded and dying people, or risk losing some vital part of your army, hopefully with the ability to negate losing if you're prepared enough. If you choose to use the blood, you unlock the Blood Mage specialization, but you alienate some of your allies and are treated with more suspicion than you would have been otherwise. This opens up ways that the other characters can call out the player character, demanding to know what makes them different to the magisters that used to rule. And the second suggestion? But please bring back the Summon of Mabari from Dragon Age 2. Seriously, I want another puppy. You know, without having to sacrifice extra party banter while I'm wandering around collecting elf fruit or something. Now on to party members. Okay, this is a tough one, because you've got to have a well thought through character with story arc onto themselves, and they've got to bring insights to part of the game's world, and they've got to be something we haven't really seen before, or a returning character who may still have narrative potential. This will be a party of 3 mages, 3 rogues, and 3 warriors. Let's start with the returning characters that, if not fully fledged party members, should absolutely be involved in the story in some capacity. These aren't the only returning characters, but I do feel they are the ones that have the most to contribute, starting with the least to most necessary. Number 1, Fenris. Wait, hold off racing to the comments section for just a minute and let me explain. I think it would be a terrific end to his character arc to go from vengeful runaway to the liberator of slaves. Needless to say, he wouldn't be a mage hater after his time spent with Hawke, if they were friends, but I think there's things to be done with his character. And if he died in your playthrough, that doesn't necessarily kill the idea of his involvement, seeing as that you could kill Liliana in Origins and she still ended up as an advisor in Inquisition. In canon, he's taking out Tevinter slavers according to Varric. Is it really that much of a stretch to imagine him joining a mass slave revolt? And if you gave him to Daenerys, number 1, you are a monster. Why would you do that? What the hell is wrong with you? Where was I? Oh yeah, if you gave him to Daenerys, he would already be in Tevinter, and not only could you recruit him, but further down the line you could help him get some massive payback on your douchebag of a Hawke. And it would be really, really nice to see him in next-gen graphics. Just saying. Number 2, Cremisius Aclassi, also known as Krem, lieutenant of the Bull's Chargers, loyal, brave and snarky. He became an instant fan favourite. It makes sense the PC would be hiring mercenaries to help with the uprising. Why not have them hire the Chargers? This makes perfect sense if the Iron Bull got with Dorian, but again, I can see the Chargers coming to the defense of a mass slave uprising. And to top it off, Krem originally fled to Winter when he was outed as a trans man. It would be great for him to go back and see his dad and try and change his homeland into a better place. Krem, because we could all use some creme brulee in our lives. And number 3 should absolutely 100% be a party member. Drumroll, please. Mivaris Talani. Thank you, I'm quite proud of that one. For those not in the know, May was a character introduced in the Dragon Age comic book series who went on an adventure with Alistair, Varric and Isabella of all people. May is a playful, ruthless but not evil and feisty Magister. Along with Dorian, she's one of the best examples of how not every Magister is an evil caricature. She's already technically made her debut in canon as she gets a War Table quest line in Inquisition, as well as Dorian mentioning her as a friend. She's even standing next to Dorian in one of his epilogue slides. Oh yes, and she should totally be romanceable, seeing as that she's single and all. And to anyone wondering why I didn't choose Dorian as an essential person for the story, he absolutely is. I just think he should take on more of an advisory role this time around. But seeing as Cullen was able to join you for a mission, there's no reason that Dorian wouldn't be able to break out the sparkle fingers from time to time. On to the rest of the party. I only really have the bold strokes and some returning characters here. I'm not really committed to these as I was the previous 3, so just fair warning. Personally, I think it's time for a Cerebus as a party member. I'm thinking basically a female version of Katogen from Dragon Age 2, seeing as that, he could talk after a fashion. But I would have her, rather understandably, hate the Qunari, just because we never had a party member that was trapped in the Qun before and desperately wanted to get out of it. Next, because it's Dragon Age, we need there to be an apostate that betrays you in some way in the end. So I'm thinking we could have a character that I'm going to dub the Slave Apostate Elf, or Psy. I'm thinking this character would be a fellow slave at the beginning of the game, the person most devoted to the cause of freedom, and over the course of the story they end up committing more and more extreme acts in the name of the cause, until they do something unforgivable, something that threatens to alienate your allies unless you exile him. Feeling betrayed, he flees to do something in the 3rd act, which I'll hold back on saying for the moment, but any fan of the Dragon Age universe can pretty much guess when he'll turn up again. Okay, so that's the mages done. On to rogues. Now, our returning Warden party members have been a warrior and a mage, Ogren and Anders. So I suggest we bring back a rogue this time around. So how about Sigrun or Nathaniel Howe from Awakening? Both firm fan favourites and could totally have some cool Warden-y stuff to do, with ties to the hero Ferelden and possibly Hawk to boot. The next rogue would be a male Dalish elf, picture a Tamlin type that actually lived to see the main plot, and Scout Harding maybe? On to warriors. Seeing as my 2 warrior slots are already taken, I'm going to pitch that the final warrior is a female dwarf. She's acerbic and hilariously deadpan, but in the grand scheme of things doesn't seem to tie into the grander story at large. Your average player might wonder what the hook for her character is supposed to be. She's incredibly skilled in battle, but doesn't seem to have any particular ties or connections to any particular faction. But then she lets you in on her ceaseless and relentless hatred of birds, when suddenly it all clicks into place. This is Shale after she's reclaimed her mortality. Oh, and a visit to Wynn's grave is an absolute must. On to the plot. I think a return to the act structure from Dragon Age 2 will help with some of the lackluster pacing issues that Dragon Age Inquisition suffered from. So I've put together the overall story and broken it down into a 3-act structure. And I just want to take a second to say that I'm just spitballing here, and because I don't have to worry about budgets and studio oversight and making this an actual reality, I'm not holding this up as a criticism of BioWare, so let's just call this my ideal Dragon Age game for me personally. And the title for this would be Dragon Age Liberation. Prologue. Our protagonist is asleep in their bed as we dive into the character creator, with the ability to choose between human, elf, dwarf, and Vashoth. The protagonist is a slave to a wealthy, but not particularly highly regarded magister who's throwing a ball later that night. You help your friends say, that's slave apostate elf, and the other slaves prepare for the ball. As your master's favourite, you have a certain standing among them. It also helped to teach new players about the moral choice aspect of, say, if you catch another slave doing something they shouldn't and you can choose to turn them in or not. Key thing, you can work some major foreshadowing into all the conversations the slaves are having with each other. Eventually, you take your master's side as the ball begins. Your master is challenged to a duel by a fellow magister, one with a reputation for cruelty and great ambition. Your master uses the blood of your fellow slaves to enhance his power, but to no avail. He is promptly slaughtered by the other magister, who seizes all of your master's property, including yourself and Sai. Act 1. Rebellion. After a time skip of a few months, we see that your new master has chosen to demonstrate his disdain for your old one by making his slaves into common labourers. And by labour, I mean the back-breaking work under the blazing sun until you're dead kind of labour. Turns out you're working on some incredible new monument to the glory of the magisters, or something of that ilk. From now on, you start making merciful or ruthless choices. Not a paragon renegade meter, just a visual cue to tell you, this decision will affect how people react to you down the road, sort of thing. Say, for example, you stop to give a fellow slave the last of your water. This way, your fellow slaves will treat you as a pillar of community, rather than a boss or a resident badass. Now, the overseer of the project is a sadistic bastard, and he's eager to indulge in whippings, or if he's feeling particularly vindictive, he'll use the runes on the slave chains to shock them into a painful incapacitation. As you're getting on with your work, another slave causes an accident that breaks the monument, and manages to deactivate the magic on your chains. Not realizing the damage caused that little side effect, the overseer grabs the slave and prepares to beat them to death. Sai tries to intervene, but the overseer shocks him into submission and drags him to the other slave to kill him too. With nothing else to hand, the PC attacks the overseer and beats them to death with their own chains. Yes, guys, the metaphors aren't going to be particularly subtle here. Sorry about that. So yeah, the PCs just killed the overseer in front of dozens of slaves and freemen alike. Now, at this exact moment, the situation in Tevinter is something akin to a powder keg, and you aren't so much as throwing a lit match as you are a raging fireball. Suddenly, slaves rise up and strike down the remaining overseers and drive away the remaining guards. In the chaos, you and Sai are smuggled away and hidden by friends. The slaves who saw you believe that you were responsible for rendering your chains inert, and as the story spreads like wildfire, it is elevated to some kind of supernatural power, and as your act of defiance is whispered among the slaves in Tevinter, they name you the Chainbreaker. The rest of the act is a much more general overview. You escape from the city and then travel from place to place in Tevinter, meeting mercenaries, survivors of previous rebellions, and sympathisers to your cause in the form of Dorian and May. And come on, I can't be the only person that thinks that marching through Tevinter Daenerys Targaryen style sounds like an amazing BioWare experience. This arc would build to a climax where the rebels would lay siege to Minrathous, storming the gates, battling your way to the centre of the city, with the boss fight being the Archon of the Magisterium and his right-hand man, that magister who sentenced you to be worked to death. So you fight, until you've finally done it. You've achieved what no other slave rebellion has done since Andraste. The Magisterium threw everything it had at you, and you won. But before the dust has even settled in the chamber, suddenly a scout runs in. "Chainbreaker! Chainbreaker!" they cry. "There's a fleet of Kunari dreadnoughts on the horizon." "How many?" you ask. They look up at you. "I stopped counting at 50. You rush to the window to see hundreds of ships, all each carrying dozens, if not hundreds, of Kunari clad all in full plate armour. Apparently the Kunari heard about your little rebellion and decided that now was the time to bring the entirety of Thedas under the heel of the Kun. Knowing your army doesn't stand a chance against this invasion, you are forced to flee Minrathous once again, but this time as Tevinter's de facto leader. You head south, overwhelmed but with the faintest glimmer of hope that your pleas for help won't fall on deaf ears. Act 2. Invasion. Now be warned, my structure for this act is a lot less concrete. It's honestly more of a beginning and an end with a laundry list of quests I'd like to see that couldn't really take place in the first or the third act. So don't expect so quite specific an arc. I'm basically pitching a cross between Dragon Age Origins and Mass Effect 3. So the scrappy underdog, oh crap, we're all going to die unless we get help vibe tied into the whole, helping people get their shit together so you can get their resources to repel a mass invasion. And because we really want this conflict to feel as if it's encompassing all of Thedas, there's going to be lots and lots and lots of returning characters to help with that epic sense of scale. It also helped tie up some of those lingering plot threads. So I want to be able to reach out to Divine Victoria about the possibility of uniting the Chantries, with different responses depending on who she is. There should totally be a courtly intrigue mission in Antiva involving the Crows, hopefully making Zevran the Grand Master. Talis may be sneaking information to you on the sly and maybe committing to finally becoming a Talvashoth. Sebastian insisting that the only way he'll commit Starkhaven's forces is to capture Anders for him, and then you get a standoff where you have to choose whether Anders dies, Sebastian dies, or you convince him to let go of his revenge finally and move the fuck on. And you get his resources. I want to have diplomatic talks with Balin or Haramont, and maybe representatives from Kal Sharok, because that would be freaking cool. Contacting the Felicissima Armada, and maybe getting involved with Isabella's pirate fleet. Revisiting Kirkwall, Denerim, or Amaranthine. Ideally all three, but if I had to pick one, I'd say Kirkwall. Check out what's going down with the whole circles/colleges of Magi to see how that's going on. Maybe track down the location of the Arlath Ven, which is the meeting of all the Dalish clans every 10 years. Maybe work towards giving the Dalish real political power in Thedas in trade for their army, or whatever army they can provide. Meeting Bodan and Sandal again, because this needs to happen. Reaching out to the Inquisition. And the Seekers of Truth. Maybe a trip to the Fade. Find out what happened with who the hell we left in there. Maybe seeing what's going down with that whole Grey Warden Civil War thing. Maybe some cool alliances with the criminal underclasses of Thedas, like the Carter and the Coterie. Find out what the Red Jenny's up to. What is the Black City? Maybe we can finally take Anders to the Avar and maybe finally depossess him. This should also involve a mass summit with all the leaders of Thedas. King Alistair, Queen Honora, Emperor Selene, Briala, Emperor Gaspar, the Inquisition, whatever combination is relevant for your playthrough. So yeah, lots and lots of meaty story content there, but eventually you'll pull your resources together, and for the first time in history, all the powers of Thedas stand united against the Qun. Now, I'd say this has got to be epic. This has got to blow the siege of Minrathous out of the water, and considering you'll have a fleet of ships with you, you could do this literally. So with the might of Thedas behind you, you return to Tevinter to drive the Qunari from Thedas once and for all. So the Qunari meet on one side of the battlefield, the forces of Thedas on another. They both line up and charge into battle. Now, what I'm proposing here is basically the Dragon Age equivalent of that shot in the Avengers, you know. The culmination of several games and years of build-up so that Dragon Age Liberation can throw a massive self-indulgent party for itself. I'm talking Maevaris fighting alongside Vivian and Dorian. I'm talking the Iron Bull fighting alongside Alistair and Aveline. I'm talking Hawk and the Inquisitor combining their teams to charge a wall of armoured Qunari. And Thedas is making headway, but suddenly the Arishok, aka the Qunari formerly known as Sten, takes to the battlefield. Rallying his troops behind him, and the unstoppable force of the Qunari becomes apparent. Each side is sustaining heavy losses, but neither is losing ground. They can't keep this up. Something's got to give. Suddenly, in the chaos of the battle, you see a lone figure running through it, cutting down Qunari left and right. You see a flash of blue, of silver. And there, suddenly, between the two armies, stands the hero of Ferelden themselves. Or, if they died, Grey Warden Alistair works just fine as well. If the Warden returned Asala, the Arishok's sword, the hero refers to the Arishok as Kadan and pleads to negotiate a truce. Now, depending on a few factors, it could end up with a duel to the death, with the Qunari retreating to Saharan, or, this is the trickiest one, you get a bona fide alliance with the Qunari. But either way, the armies disperse and you are left in the rubble, wondering what to do in the absence of an impending threat. Oh boy. So another summit springs up to establish Tevinter's, and possibly Qunari's, future relationship with Thedas. And there's a bunch of ways this can go down, but I'll leave that to your imagination for a moment. But there's totally room for a reunion between the Warden and their love interest. Especially if it's King Alistair. Because after all that's done, the Inquisitor stands and tells the leaders of a united Thedas about their search for Fen-Horel, the Dreadwolf. Leading us into Act 3, Liberation. I want this act to have a very tight focus and feel much more personal, than the two previous acts, even if the stakes are essentially, the world will end if we don't stop the egg! So the main story beats of this act are divided between the Warden, Hawke, and the Inquisitor. The Inquisitor tells the Summit that whilst tracking Solus has been difficult due to the Alluvian network, he has been seen several times in the Arlathan forest. This will set up what is clearly the final showdown of the game and the culmination of almost a franchise's worth of hints and build-ups. So these story threads will involve all four of the protagonists. The Warden's story thread is obvious. They went looking for a cure to the Blight. Have they found it or not? This can be a nice tying up of the Warden Civil War storyline from Act 2, and considering it's Dragon Age, I'm going to guess that whatever the cure involves is going to require a sacrifice. Because Maker knows we need to justify that Warden oath in every single game. In war, victory. In peace, vigilance. In death, sacrifice. Hell, maybe even Hawke can get in on this. Imagine the Warden, Hawke, their Warden sibling, and you go off to some ancient temple of something or other, and it comes down to having to sacrifice a Warden. The Warden sibling is prepared to do it, but Hawke begs them not to. The Warden hesitates, being so close to returning to a full and happy life with their love interest, and they are just so tired of 14 years of strife and pain. They turn to the Chainbreaker and ask them to choose. Which Warden will die to save the lives of every Warden in Thedas? Expect some massive repercussions on that one. I think for Hawke's quest we can wind up tracking down Flemeth in some manner. Also, considering it's an essential story beat that we explain the significance of Fen Harel and the Orb and all that jazz. Admittedly, Solus stole her essence in the stinger for DAI, so maybe she could have taken Morrigan's body, although Flemeth's cryptic responses on that topic kind of imply that's not what she wants. But we need Flemeth in the game because it's tradition, and it would be extremely fan squeal inducing for me personally for the two heroes she's personally rescued from the brink of disaster to stand in front of her triumphant. Why that ties into Hawke in particular, I'm not quite sure, but there's something to be made of it. But as the act moves on, all the frivolous cameos fall away as people return to their responsibilities away from the Chainbreaker, until you decide to pursue Solus in the Arlathan forest. Now, I'm guessing, due to the name, this is in fact the true location of the ruins of Arlathan, which will make a terrific location of a massive fight between the Chainbreaker's forces and all the elves that Solus has drawn to fight for him. Now, as the battle rages across the ruins of all four protagonists, if they're alive, run to the centre of the ruin where they find Solus holding an orb. Mythal's orb. Oh shit. Now, obviously, depending on who is present at this confrontation will affect the outcome, but I absolutely cannot, in my heart, remove the Inquisitor from this scene. Despite the fact that the rest of Liberation should absolutely be the Chainbreaker's story, the resolution with Solus has to be achieved by the Inquisitor, because fundamentally that's how the Inquisitor's story should end. Unless he hated you, then he should probably kill the Inquisitor outright. So the protagonist charged towards Solus, with the Inquisitor either begging them to let them talk to him if he committed to trying to redeem him at the end of Trespasser, or charging into battle against him. I would say either way this works out being a boss battle with Solus. Now you may wonder how the hell this is going to work, considering Solus can do this. Well, consider, number one, that Solus ultimately doesn't want to harm the Inquisitor, so he'd try to avoid doing that, but in a way that he'd still have to defend himself. And number two, imagine how cool a boss fight with Solus would be if he transformed into his eldritch, multi-eyed Helsing wolf form first. So again, you fight, until Solus decides to tip the fight in his favour and takes the battle to the Fade, with everyone in hot pursuit. But the Chainbreaker is stopped by Sai. See, I told you he'd turn up again. Turns out he ran out to join Solus when you kicked him out of the rebellion ages ago, but he ran into some serious trouble on the way and ended up losing an eye or something. He doesn't want to kill you, but he won't let you pursue Solus without a fight. So you either have to fight him, or depending on how well you've treated him before, convince him to be friends again. Once you've dealt with Sai, the Chainbreaker leaps into the Fade to help stop Solus, only to find that he's back in his elf form. The Chainbreaker sees that Hawke and the Inquisitor are barely standing. Try as they might, Solus is just too powerful. Solus holds the Orb of Mythal aloft and prepares to sunder the veil. Now this has got to be the moment where we stop fighting and make one last ditch attempt to convince Solus about the worth of the world. The Chainbreaker starts, Hawk picks up when they run out of steam, and the Inquisitor finishes, walking closer and closer to Solus until they can touch him. If the Inquisitor swore to stop Solus, they stab and kill him. If they swore to save him, they hug him. If they romanced him, then they kiss. And the orb falls from his hand. The Chainbreaker runs and grabs it before they and Hawk leave Solus and the Inquisitor in the Fade. When you return to the Arlathan ruins, your armies have forced the elves to surrender, and moments later either Solus and the Inquisitor emerges, or the Inquisitor emerges with Solus's corpse. Both give a speech about how Solus wasn't a god and had no right to claim their service. The elves ask where should they go. They've abandoned their posts. There's nowhere in Thedas that will take them. The Chainbreaker steps up and decides either to take them as slaves or vowing that the new Tevinter will be a land of equality under their rule. Either way, the elves are dispersed. Solus says he now has to find a purpose again, something the Inquisitor is willing to help him with, and they leave together. The hero Ferelden and Hawk say that they think they should quit while they're ahead and retire, so they finally head home to their love interest. After which, Sai approaches the Chainbreaker and says, "So, what do you want to do now?" You then get a multitude of choices, everything from wanting to make Tevinter better, to expanding their lands, to conquering the Qunari. Then we see the Chainbreaker leading their people back to Minrathous. We see them repair and rebuild the city, even better than it was before, and the Chainbreaker stands above their city, hopeful for the future of a united Thedas. Cut to epilogue slides. But wait! There's a mid-credits stinger! We see the Deep Roads, with dozens of darkspawn scrabbling and clawing at an enormous wall of stone. An ogre appears and punches through, creating a massive gap into the cavern beyond. Two tall figures walk among the darkspawn and they bow to them as we see the architect and another of the remaining magisters who blighted the world. Under the glowing light of blue lyrium veins, we see little except of how vast the cavern is, until we see the floor seem to shift under the light. An enormous but beautiful dragon raises its head. This is Razakael, the old god of mystery. The architect and the other fallen magister approach the dragon, only for a second dragon to rear its snarling head at them. This is Lusakan, the dragon of night. Unfazed by the dragons, the architect continues to approach them, the fallen magister beside him. They reach up and touch the dragons, as we see their forms become corrupted by the blight, as the rest of the darkspawn swarm the cave, corrupting the lyrium veins so the gentle blue glow turns to an ominous red, as we see the birth of two arch-demons. Yes, a new double mega uber blight has been unleashed on Thedas, and now you're shaking in your little booties, already desperate to get your hands on DA5. So what did you guys think? Is this the direction you think the series should go in, or would you like to see something else? Let us know in the comments. Dareth Shiral Fallon Mithalanast.